when you're writing a story and your goal is to keep your readers engaged, it's important to have a lot of reversals, which is essentially just a fancy word for having a lot of twists. How many reversals a story has and how a narrative balances reversals can often be the difference between having a story that falls kind of flat and is pretty boring to readers, or is gripping and engaging and something that readers cannot put down and cannot stop thinking about. So today I'm going to explain to you what reversals are, why reversals matter, give you some examples, and give you some tips for how to incorporate them into your own writing. I'm still battling a head cold. I just feel all sorts of kind of congested and gross. So if I sound like that, that is why. I have a much stronger cup of coffee than I usually have while filming these videos. My brain is just not working. A reversal is an abrupt change in your story that reveals something new and changes the stakes. They're essentially just oh shit moments where you're reading and you're like, oh shit, that just happened, and that changed something fundamentally about the story or what I believe the story to be. There should be a lot of these sprinkled into your story. If you were to plot out your story in a good fortune versus bad fortune graph, your story should look kind of like this throughout the whole book. You should have big peaks, big valleys, big peaks, big valleys of like good fortune versus bad fortune, and lots of different twists that happen throughout. If everything your characters do works out exactly as they planned, and eventually they're going to defeat the bad guy and come out victorious, then nothing really happens in that story and it's pretty boring to read. If everything that your character's plan goes wrong and they are just pummeled like some sort of fictional punching bag for the entire book and nothing ever goes their way, then that can also be exhausting to read. There are two main types of reversals. The first one is the reversal of fortune, which is essentially what I just talked about, this good versus bad fortune, and how good things should happen to your characters and bad things should happen, and you should balance those over the course of the book. And the other is the reversal of reader understanding. So if readers think something is a particular way, then you can have a reversal that changes the way that they think about things because they learn a critical new piece of information that casts everything in a different light. You can use a balance of these two different types of reversals to create this wiggly graph over the course of your story. I usually think of these slightly separate. Like I'll have a fortune reversal. I'll think about that on the graph of like, you having a wiggly graph between good fortune and bad fortune. And then I like to sprinkle in reader understanding reversals throughout the story and kind of give myself a bit of a benchmark where I like to have a certain set number of them over the course of the book. Set number changes depending on what book I'm writing, but I like to have one big one in Act 1, obviously the midpoint, one big one kind of leading up to the climax, something happens, and then nothing happens after that. So like roughly like 4 to 5 big reader understanding reversals. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just a rule of thumb that I try to keep into the back of my mind because then usually I'll sprinkle in a couple and at least be aware that that's something I should do. So why are reversals important? Reversals matter because they keep stories fresh, they keep them engaging, they keep the pace moving, they keep the stakes high, they make the stories more unpredictable. You'll be able to have readers who didn't see certain things coming. That will be a very good feeling for the reader because they're going to be reinvested in your story. What are some examples of these different types of reversals? An example of a reversal of fortune would be if you're writing a serial killer thriller and your main character is trying to catch this serial killer, and they catch the serial killer, like they make a plan, they catch the serial killer, they think that they have got the serial killer locked down, they are relieved and happy, and then the serial killer starts to laugh at them, like the serial killer knows something that they don't. Now your characters don't feel like celebrating anymore because it seems like the serial killer knows something that they don't, and maybe shortly after the serial killer escapes or something happens that the serial killer had planned, and then the serial killer is no longer caught and your heroes are not in a position worth celebrating anymore. Their fortune reversed because their good fortune went up when they caught the serial killer, and then when the serial killer escaped, their fortune went way down because maybe now the serial killer is hunting them again. An example of a reversal of reader understanding would be if your character had a mentor and this mentor had been very nurturing to them and had been helping guide them through the story, and then all of a sudden you have a scene where either the hero walks in on the mentor talking to someone else and talking about how they're going to betray the hero. I mean, this is kind of a corny example, but that would be a change in reader understanding because now the reader knows that the mentor is actually not looking out for the best interests of the hero, and that casts the story in a whole new light, because up until this point, the hero thought that they could trust the mentor, and so did the reader, but then now when the reader thinks that they can't trust the mentor, that casts the events of the story in a different light, especially if you're not writing in the first person and maybe you can show that without your main character seeing it. Then the readers know something that the character doesn't. So all of this sounds really good in theory, and I know when I was learning about this, I understood this on a very theoretical level. Like, I get how reversals of fortune are good. I understand how casting different events in different lights is good, but I don't know how to do that when I'm writing a book. It's hard to have that bird's eye view of your entire novel while you're in the details of like the scene by scene events. So here is kind of how I approach trying to work in reversals, and this might not be the best method to do it, but this is just how I do it now. So I try to plan reversals during the outlining stage, and when I'm plotting out a book, if you've watched any of my other plotting videos, you'll understand kind of how I like to approach story structure and story arcs. I always like to plot out like my beginning, middles, and ends, and how like I am able to build the rising tension over, a story arc, and how I can have like my point of entry and my inciting incident and midpoint and climax resolution. I have that structure. And then after I do that, I'll start filling in a bunch of scenes and just brainstorming scenes. A lot of times I'll follow something like a hero's journey just for a general framework, and then I will start really big with like a hero's journey bullet point structure, and then I will like fill in the gaps from there. I like to layer on this idea of having reversals onto that structure and just keep it in mind very tentatively this early in the process. Like just thinking about what my reader is going to be thinking about each character, just thinking about different ways that I can undermine expectations, different ways that, certain characters can betray other characters, or critical pieces of information I know about the characters that I want to reveal later. Maybe, I want the readers to think that one character is going to be one thing and then they turn out to be something else later on down the line. And I try to put the crumbs of that in my initial outline so that when I sit down to write my draft, I'm able to play with that while I'm drafting. I always tend to make life really difficult for my characters, so I actually used this AI tool, I think last year, just to try it out. I ended up not liking it very much, but one of the features that it had was to show this like reversal of fortune over the course of the book and how the AI interpreted that. And a lot of the times in my books, because I was writing like kind of later books in the series, my fortune would kind of like, instead of go evenly across the whole good fortune, bad fortune line, it would kind of go like this and like taper off. Like even the good fortune would be below the like bad fortune. Like it was getting kind of depressing. And so when I saw that trend, I would be able to go back and make an effort to kind of like add some more humor, add some more scenes that like elevated the characters more and tried to think of ways that they could succeed more. That is my problem. I tend to make life too hard for my characters. You might have the opposite problem and make life too easy for your characters. I'm not saying you should go and do this AI report just for that graph, because I don't think it's worth it for the cost. But this is something that you can ask beta readers also to kind of get a sense of, to see whether or not they found it depressing or frustrating, or, wanted more of good fortune or bad fortune. I find it useful to try to track what my readers think and understand about my story over the course of the entire story. And then once I understand that, it's a little bit easier for me to figure out places that I can put reversals in. I know a lot of this is not very actionable advice, and I really like giving actionable advice on the channel, but this is kind of a nebulous concept, and I really don't think there's a specific formula for how many reversals should go in a story and how to create good fortune versus bad fortune. It is just a rule of thumb that I like to keep in mind, that when my characters win, they also have to lose. And shortly after they win, they lose, and then after they lose, they win. Like if you do too much losing or too much winning, then your narrative is going to become stagnant. Also, full disclosure, I didn't really think about this that much when I was first starting out writing. This is kind of one of those concepts that I've learned to layer in as I've gotten more comfortable learning how to write and plotting books and writing books. There are so many things to keep in your head when you're trying to write a book for the first time. You're thinking about plotting and characters and dialogue and description and now reversals. And if you're thinking about everything at the same, like it's impossible to do all of these things and hold them all in your head at the same time when you're first starting out. Don't start thinking about reversals. Like it's more important to figure out your dialogue and your plotting and your characterization and stuff first. But once you feel like you have a pretty good handle on that, starting to think about reversals and ways that you can incorporate them and play with them in scenes can really elevate your plotting. You can also incorporate like scene reversals, where you build expectations to one thing and then something else happens on a scene level, and then that changes the reader's understanding of the scene. But I still find that plotting out big ones when I'm in the outlining stage really helps me. And then if I see opportunities for reversals, like I'll just keep it in the back of my head as I'm writing. Like, what if I did this, or what if I did the opposite of what people would think I was going to do here, and then it takes scenes into different directions. And I find that doing that helps me get reversals into my writing early, also because I'm a plotter and that's just typically how I work. You can also add them during the revision process. If you get feedback from beta readers that a certain section of the book really dragged, you can go back and add in a major reversal or cut out some of the fluff and like try to just tighten it that way by like adding a big twist in the middle of that. That could really help energize that section. That's all I have for you on reversals. I hope that it was helpful as just a very brief primer into what reversals are and why they're important. If you have a second, I'd be super grateful if you could like this video and also subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning author who makes videos sharing actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I'm the author of the 5-book paranormal thriller They Stay series, along with many other projects that are currently in the works. How do you like to incorporate reversals into your stories? Do you think about that during the outlining stage, or do you think about that as you're writing? I do find it's helpful to have that as a mindset when you're writing, like paying attention to what twists you can do and what things you can turn on your head. But again, you need to get used, you can only hold so many things in your head at the same time. So you have to get used to the basics first before you can go through writing like with that in the back of your mind. I hope you have a good week, everybody. And as always, happy writing.